I'll be discussing the Meech Lake Accord. So what was the Meech Lake Accord intended to do? So the Prime Minister at the time, Brian Mulroney, wanted to address issues of the division of power between the federal and provincial governments in Canada, and probably wanted to address the concerns of Quebec wanting to be a distinct society and wanting to have Canada recognize their cultural differences. Which why? Why? So yeah, here's a quick little timeline. So in 1981 to 1982, Chief Elijah Harper of Red Sucker Lake First Nation became the first Indigenous person to take a seat in the Manitoba legislature. This was also when Quebec refused to accept the Patriation Package, which transferred the control from British Parliament to Canada's federal and provincial legislatures. And since they denied this, this is why the Meech Lake Accord was now happening later on, because they denied this package. In 1986, Chief Elijah Harper joined the cabinet as minister without portfolio, and he was responsible for Indigenous affairs, but resigned a year later due to a DUI. In 1987, Chief Elijah Harper joined the cabinet again as Minister of Northern Affairs for Manitoba, and this was also when the Prime Minister at the time and 10 Canadian premiers met at Meech Lake and continued to sign a constitutional agreement, the Meech Lake Accord, without consulting Canada's First Nations. And in 1990, Chief Elijah Harper opposes the Meech Lake Accord when the legislature threatened to go beyond the 3-year time limit. And and on June 23rd of that year, the Accord collapsed. So kind of a summary of the Meech Lake Accord from an Indigenous perspective here. So what were the stakes for Indigenous people? So the primary issue was that Prime Minister wanted to make this major change to the Constitution without the input of any Indigenous peoples whom the land actually belonged to, and the Accord intended to identify Quebec as a distinct society, and Indigenous peoples who were first on the land were barely recognized themselves. The damage the Accord would have done on the Indigenous community would have been that Canada would have to recognize Quebec as a distinct society when Canada barely sees Indigenous groups as distinct societies. Gives those societies proper recognition, funding, respect, or equity. So why should we give Quebec that kind of recognition? Chief Harper's words were that he opposed this accord because we were to recognize Quebec as a distinct society, whereas Aboriginal people themselves were completely left out, and we were the first peoples here, and why don't we get this recognition, sort of thing. So which Indigenous nations were involved? So the failure of the Meech Lake Accord impacted all Indigenous nations in Canada, really, but the location of the accord was based in and around Quebec. And the individual who stopped it from happening, Chief Elijah Harper, is actually from Ojibwe Cree, Red Sucker Lake, Manitoba, also known as Turtle Island. So on whose land did the event occur? Yeah, Chief Harper declined the accord in Winnipeg on Treaty 5 territory, and the initial Meech Lake Accord gathering happened in Meech Lake. And which people were involved? So it was a bunch of Indigenous groups supporting the failure of this accord, and women's group. There was a lot of allies for that. It was. And then was there a difference in opinion among Indigenous peoples involved? And they were all kind of on the same page. Just Chief Elijah Harper was really expressing their opinions, being that voice for them. So how did Canada characterize this event? So Canada characterized the accord to be a positive thing, especially in Quebec. The public had hoped that the accord could slow down separatism in Quebec, but the accord's failure created high tensions and backlash in Quebec, and the failure of the accord led to the creation of the Bloc Québécois Party, which its goal is to separate from Canada completely. And they claimed to feel alienated from Canada. Try being an Indigenous person. How about, So what was the media's portrayal, language used, images used, and media mainstream to portray Indigenous people? So the media was very white-based. So I looked up the Meech Lake Accord, and it was all about just the white arguments, and I had to really dig to find Chief Harper's name in there, which is really odd because he had such a great impact on this whole thing. And so Chief Harper had kind of a negative perception on his name due to a past DUI charge, but he became a hero to Indigenous peoples around Canada. So the outcome of the accord. So this was so powerfully, Chief Elijah Harper declined the accord 8 separate times because they wouldn't really listen to him the first few times. And he declined the accord while raising an eagle feather, which was very powerful because the feather is such a peaceful symbol, and it proves kind of that politics can be done peacefully. So the accord had to be done within 3 years, and it passed that 3-year limit because of Chief Elijah Harper. So it was not passed; it was ratified, or it was not ratified. And so what was done for the Indigenous peoples following the accord? It was really empowering to the Indigenous community that Chief Elijah Harper defeated the accord, since Indigenous peoples have been in battle with colonialism for over a century. Even though the act was small, it spoke volumes. On Twitter, I looked up Meech Lake Accord, and there's all these tweets saying, he really helped me want to fight for Indigenous rights. I became a lawyer because of him. So that's just that little tweet there. But and then in what ways does this event really connect to this course? So topic 3.1 definitely connects to this topic for sure. So it's settler colonialism, privilege, and complicity, and just really emphasizing that white people just think they can just take whatever they want without addressing the first peoples on the lands, and it's really frustrating. So what I really took away from this was that I had no clue what the Meech Lake Accord really was, so that was awesome to learn about. But beyond that, it made me realize that Canada needs to respect Indigenous voices in politics, period. And it's not being done enough. We're not making decisions with the Indigenous people, the main people of our land, and that's really it. So we need to consult with our Indigenous voices more.